welcome everyone. I'm Ricardo de Leon, class of 86, and I'm part of the Recuerdos team. There are three of us on the session right now who are part of the team, Margaret Sena and Juana Pacheco, and myself, and great effort and great people who have been working against this project for over a year now. And frankly, this project's been going on for about 6 or 7 years. Way back when I was on the ALPA board, we came up with this idea of doing this Recuerdos effort. And the thinking of that was, it was, 5, 6 years ago, the first Latinos that came on campus in significant way were back in the 70s. And those folks that went to Princeton in the 70s, that was 50 years ago. So those folks are they're in their 70s now. And it was like, wow, what was it like in the 70s? And what were the stories from the 70s that these individuals went through? And wouldn't it be great if we could capture those stories? Wouldn't it be great if we could document them? And then the 80s, and then the 90s, and then the zeros, and have this collection of stories that would be available for incoming students, class of 2025, class of 2026. That a young student coming to the university store this fall could go to the youth store and pick up a book, and it would be Recuerdos de Latinos de Princeton over the 50 years that we were there. And they would read stories about what it was like when Manuel del Valle or Margarita Rosa or Oscar Castro or Amparo Gonzalez, what was it like when we were at Princeton? And what were the lessons that we learned that if they were to read those stories, that they might get that perspective that they wouldn't have otherwise? Because it's quite likely that their tío and their tía, or their mom or their dad, did not go to Princeton. And a lot of the students that we went to school with did. They're legacy students, or they had tío or tía. They had someone that could share their wisdom. A lot of the students who are going on campus who are Latino today do not have that. But we could be those people. We could be the people providing that wisdom. So that's the idea behind Recuerdos. I'm going to share a timeline that we put together. Can you all see my screen now? Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Back a few months ago, the Recuerdos team hired a couple of interns that went and created a database with the Princetonian articles, and we dating as far back as they could find any record whatsoever. So this goes back all the way into the 50s, into the 40s, and going all the way more recent into the late teens. Every single time there were some keywords that mentioned Latino, mentioned Acción Puertorriqueña, mentioned Chicano Caucus, mentioned any one of those items, we were able to create this timeline, and it's going to be available for everyone. And you can see that people will be able to click on an article and the actual article will come up. This right here is the Princetonian from November 25th, 1992, and it talks about the pachanga. And in 1992, there was the pachanga on campus, and you can see how certain words are coded, but it talks about in this one that there were 300 students that showed up across 17 different campuses. Other guests included San Francisco State University, Professor Jose Cuellar, Dr. Loco. We'll be able to provide all those stories on this timeline, and people will be able to comment, I was there. And here's a picture of what it was like. And this is how much trouble it was to create, but this is how much fun it was. People will be able to talk all these different things on the timeline and at events and say, oh, yeah, that happened, but this also happened. And we need to capture that memory too. The timeline is going to be very, very interactive. It's the start, and everything's based on the Princetonian, so it may not be 100% accurate, but it's documented. And that's where we are the truth tellers. We are the folks that can go in and provide perspective about what reality was, and we can add the perspective of what it was like to be there. So that's what the Recuerdos effort is. You know, we want to document these stories. We want to appreciate the fact that, you know, you all from the 90s, that the folks from the 70s, when we had that session, it was incredible. And it was taped. And I would encourage everyone to listen to the 70s session, because people like Margarita Rosa, Emmanuel del Valle, they came on campus with a mission to increase the numbers. And they did it. And I was there in the 80s, and I benefited from that. And when we had the 80s session, it was scheduled for an hour and a half. It went 2.5 hours because it was that involved, where people were telling stories, and it was just an incredible experience to share what it was like. And so now we're doing the 90s. And when I look at the timelines for the 90s, you all started spreading your wings. You started forming organizations. You started taking leadership positions. You were doing all these things in the 90s that kind of evolved from all the effort in the 70s and the 80s. And then you did your thing. And we want to hear what it was like. We want to hear, what was your thing? What was your experience like? Where did you come from when you went to Princeton? What was it like your 4 years, 5 years there? What do you do today? And we want to hear those stories. And to that effect, you know, what we're going to do, it's going to be, you know, we don't have, we have people here who are not in the 90s and are here to listen. And I'm going to mostly start listening now and stop talking. But what we're going to try to do is have people in the 90s kind of go through and introduce themselves, you know, who you are, you know, what class you were in, when you went to Princeton, where were you coming from? What was your experience like? And then briefly, what do you do today? And where are you today? And we're thinking, you know, spend anywhere between, you know, 3 to 8 minutes, whatever you're comfortable with. Share a recuerdo, share a story, share a moment that left an impact on you, that here we are 40, 30 years later that you're still thinking about. And then, you know, after we're done with this, write it down and send a picture, and let's capture it. But we're going to start with our 2 facilitators. We've asked 2 90 grads to kind of help kick it off and tell their stories first. And with their perspective, that's Amparo and Paul. With their perspectives, they're going to speak a little bit. And then we're just going to go through the different 90s based on your class year and just hear from you, hear what it was like. And so I'm going to mostly stop now. I might jump in here and there. But I'm going to turn it over to Amparo and ask Amparo to share her recuerdo.
Hi, everyone. Hello, mi gente. Some of you know me. Some of you may also know my younger brother, who is class of 2006, Juan Gonzalez, very active in the Ballet Folklorico. I'm going to put a link in the chat. It is called a If You Don't Know poem. And I wanted to honor my classmate, Juan Pantoja, who was an incredible human being. This is a Google document. Please open it. I've started it. Please add your memories, your ideas about Juan Pantoja. And I think it's imperative that our classmates who impacted our lives and the lives of others are remembered in the Recuerdos project. So please feel free to add if you knew Juan Pantoja, if you have a memory, if you have an idea. And I also hope that we send this to Juan Pantoja's family. I will try to find Jerry Alvarez, class of 93 or 92, and see he did stay in touch with his widow and his children. So I am class of 1990. I grew up in East Los Angeles via being an immigrant from Mexico. My family's from Mexico. And I went to Princeton after being in a pretty amazing college core group that was being reared by teachers at Roosevelt High School in East Los Angeles. Garfield High School was our rival. And Juana Maguer was from Garfield, and so he and I would always just mess around with one another. David Romero lived in Garfield area, but never went to Garfield, so we just ragged on him for selling out and going to Pacific Palisades, you know, that kind of stuff. I remember the first day I was supposed to get there, Martin Guti Ruiz recruited me. Dominga Garcia talked to my parents, assured them that I would not turn into an evil person when I got there, you know. And Ruben Flores and Joel Barrera were supposed to meet me at the train station, and they were late. And so after being on the plane by myself, scared, wearing my cha-cha girl outfit with heels and my hair all done and my boombox, I arrived at Forbes College, right? Only to be told I had to walk across campus in my high heels to go get my key. So I almost started crying. And Katura Hooper, class of 89, remember who, Ruben? Said to me, girlfriend, don't worry. Just leave your boombox there, man. Nobody here is going to take it. And I looked at him, this big, tall black guy, and I was like, all right, he's got my back. I'm going, right? That was my first experience at Princeton. And I remember going to a party that night and going back to my room and just crying because I realized this is not a place that I understand. This is not a community that I can relate to, right? And I remember crying. I remember trying to stand there and understand the music and the dynamics of just drinking and just talking. I was bored out of my mind. So I went to my room. I cried. I tried to call my parents. I cried with my little sister, my little brother, whom I loved more than anything in the world. So I just cried. Went to dinner with my roommate and the other people. And I was like, what did I do, right? And then the next day, Ruben Flores and Joel Barrera found me. They knocked on my door and they said, we are going to go get the rest of the Mexicanos, they call them Chicanos, and we're going to go hang out. And from that day on, I found my people, right? I found my friends for life. I found my community. I met incredible. I remember we tried to get you, Ruben, to come. I think you did come with us. I didn't even realize Ruben lived across the hallway from me. And I didn't even realize that, right? That first night. We picked up Juan Pantoja, who asked to see my hands to see if I could pick lettuce. And I was like, what? Pick lettuce? Why would I pick lettuce? I live in East LA, right? Like, we don't pick lettuce, right? But Juan was a farm worker. I met Carlos Romero, and Carlos lived like Lawndale. And I was like, how do Mexicanos live in Lawndale? That's like surfer country. Like, and he was like, yeah, I know how to surf. I was like, what? You know how to surf, right? All these Latinos from Texas, that night I met Raul Ramos, who later on his sister was my roommate out of Princeton. And he's an incredible professor now. I met Ruben, I read Millie. So for me, my 90s experience is really I was the last of the really 80s, right? And I was surrounded by these incredible mentors from then on around how do we advocate for the Latino and the Chicano community on campus? How do we really organize ourselves to petition, to demand at times when we needed to demand, to sit in and not get arrested when we needed to sit in, right? And we did that often. How do we coordinate with other groups on campus? And how do we build this community? How do we recruit? I mean, I remember Carlos Romero and I traveled to almost 32 high schools when we came back to LA to recruit more young Latinos, right? And then I was very lucky that Irma Martinez came to Princeton from my high school. Jerry Alvarez came to Princeton from my high school. Luis Arteaga from Salesian, which is not far, came to Princeton. And so that community grew, right? And I remember my sophomore year, we had this cohort from Victorville, right? And all of a sudden, there was another Ruben, there was Jose, there was Ana, there was, Corinne. And so there was Rocio Burgarin, there was all these people, and Silvia, they just kept on multiplying from Victorville, right? And I was like, where is this place? Like, why are they all coming, right? I think for me, the other thing that was really critical was connecting with not only the Chicanos across the East Coast going to pachangas and realizing that there was then a network of Chicano students across the East Coast working on different things together and building community and helping one another, showing up for protests, showing up for events when as necessary. But we began to build more and more community with Acción Puertorriqueña, with the African American students, with APPA on campus, with everyone that was looking to build a more just and equitable place, right? And that to me was life-changing, because that has been the model for how I work and pursue issues of social justice and equity throughout my life, right? And having Professor Del Valle there and having Professor Avalos there was critical in us exploring what it meant to be young men and women who, for the most part, let's be honest, we didn't know what we were doing. We didn't know about how to have relationships and interact with one another. And there was a lot of, messy things going on within our community around those things, right? And we had to navigate them and figure them out. But I also think that, and I will say this about myself, I cannot say that I found who I was at Princeton, because I was very lucky that I had a very strong sense of my culture, my language, and who I was before I went to Princeton. And so being there was a way for me to uncover the details, but I did not ever again after that first night feel that I had to search to be like anyone else at Princeton. I was very secure in who I was. I was very secure in understanding that the community values that I shared with many of the Latino, Asian, African American, LGBTQ folks there, the folks who were into social justice, were the values that I wanted to pursue for my life. And so I was very excited, right, to continue to be part of life at Princeton through the people that I worked with. And I'll share one other memory of how we all kind of worked together. During the was it Hurricane Hugo? We had a big party at TWC, right? And I was no longer the head of the caucus, but somehow I was there and I was helping because, we all did, right? And I remember we were dancing and we were dancing hard. And I remember we were having like all this fun, the salsa, what was the name of the rap group, Paul? I mean, the DJ group?
China?
No.
No.
Popo.
Yes,
Popo.
it was for the four dudes who were poor. That's what I always remember, right? But they weren't poor because they DJ'd all the time at Princeton. They were not poor while they were there. And I remember at one point, Cynthia Hernandez Cancio said to me, "We have all this money. What do we do with it?" And I was like, "Come with me. Let's go." And we went into the bathroom, and my grandmother was channeling through me, and I took all the money and I stuffed it in my bra in my chest. And then she said, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Nobody's gonna touch it there. Carlos is outside. All the guys are outside. Ain't nobody gonna touch me." She was like, "Okay." And at the end of the night, right, the caretaker at TWC comes over and he says to us, he says, "Guys, I need the money." And since he goes, Amps has it. And I said, "You got to give us a moment. We'll be right back with it," right? And so we went into the bathroom. She was like, "Now what do we do? It's all wet." I was like, "Who cares? It's money. It's going to people in Puerto Rico. Who cares?" Came out and he was like, "Why is this all wet?" I was like, "You don't know where it was being secure. You're good." And he just started laughing, right? And so that was like the big joke. If ever you need to secure money, just give it to Amps for a couple of months at TWC. And once in a while, when I went to TWC to watch videos or to get a hoagie and hang out with the engineers, who of course were just there to watch videos and eat their hoagies and away from the E-Quad. One of the things that I learned at TWC, and I think a lot of you who remember, was just a place to be safe. It was a place to just it didn't matter who you were, what had gone on that day. You could just show up and people would start having conversations. You could go upstairs and see who was around. If people were cooking, I mean, you weren't part of the collective, or if you were, but you just sat around and talked to people, right? And that was really important. It was the safe haven for so many of us. It was a place to go to dance and to party without having to explain. And it was also the place where Cesar Chavez came to Princeton, in my time, at least twice, right, in the 80s. It was the place when Antonio Hernandez came. It was the place where we hosted students who were prospectives and held, talent shows. It was the place where we came together for pachangas. It was this incredible place that had our artwork. And so those are a lot of my very wonderful, fond memories. And I hope that this helps more students to think about their place at the university and how they may find a niche that helps them, as I am now, my 30 years later, finally coming to terms with being a tiger. No, I can't say it. Sorry, guys. Never going to be a tiger. Sorry.
Yeah, you are. Yes, you are.
Nope. Can't be a tiger. Sorry. No tail between my, legs. Sorry. No tiger ever. I can be a tigre, but I can't be a tiger.
A tigre.
Thank you, everyone. Love you.
Thank you, Amparo, so much. We're going to turn it over to Paul.
Thanks, Rika. Thanks, Amparo. It's great to see those of you that I know. Good to be here meeting those that I don't. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great. I was class of 92, so I came to Princeton in 88. I was originally born and raised in New York City. And it was interesting because I had a little bit of a different experience than Amparo coming to Princeton. And I remember this because, I've spoken at several, Latino events and organizations throughout the years. And one of the memories I had is I remember I get to Princeton and I'm registering for a class and I see a gentleman who I said, okay, he's brown. So he stood out at me, and it was Jose Briones, and I think he was already hanging out with Irma. But then he sounded different. He had a different kind of English accent, than what I did. And that's when I quickly met my first Mexican American, okay, because I didn't know any in New York. Okay, and New York was very Puerto Rican, Dominican, and my mother is Cuban, my father Puerto Rican, so inner city poor Brooklyn. Coming to Princeton was a little bit different because then I met what I was told was a Puerto Rican. I'm like, great, here we go. And I was told, oh, tú no eres puertorriqueño, tú no hablas español. Because while I spoke Spanish to my parents, I was used to speaking English to my friends and contemporary colleagues. And they all spoke Spanish to each other. So there was the Isla Puertorriqueño versus the mainland Puerto Ricans. And in my class, there was about 3 mainland Puerto Ricans that I knew of. So it was a very different experience, than what Amparo had. She had a great support group, but, and I met them and I was like, great. So I quickly had to get, interestingly, acculturized to being Hispanic, Latino. What does that mean now? Because I thought I had it down, but there's a lot of, we come in all different flavors and shapes and sizes and all that kind of good stuff. So it was interesting. It was a learning experience as far as what it meant to be a Latino. And then, interestingly enough, Irma became a good friend of mine. Frankie looks like he's on this call. I don't know why. He was a class of 89, I think, right? But that's okay. He was one of my inner city New York, because I knew him from New York. Okay, so that, it was always great to have that person. That's when they wanted, he introduced Nuwana and all that kind of good stuff. But I remember Princeton being learning, Amparo says, I didn't really come to know who I am. We evolve and we've grown over the years, and I admit that, okay? But it was eye-opening for me to say, wow, we're very diverse. It immediately exposed me to a different community amongst what it is to be Latino, to be Hispanic, okay? And that came with its pros and cons, okay? Because it was a lot of learning. from each other that we had to do. Again, to be told that I wasn't Puerto Rican, I was like, what? What do you? And the aggressive Brooklyn in me wanted to do things, but we've grown through all that type of stuff. Don't you dare not call me Puerto Rican. So we grew through that. A couple of years later, I was looking at timeline. This is not there, but we used to have this. I forget what it was called, but it was the multicultural weekend. We have prospective students come in, which is when I first visited. It was Rich Flores, who was a class before me from New York. He hosted me. So someone came to me because I was a music major undergrad. Okay, and someone said, you know what? We should do something, to liven up this thing as far as Hispanic representation and things of that nature, bring music or something of that nature. So there was a talent show and things of that nature during that weekend. So these were two island Puerto Ricans, okay, Stevie and Eddie, Stevie Hernandez and Eddie Olivera, who says, Paul, you're a musician, why don't we start a salsa band or Latin jazz band? I was like, okay, great. So we did. I said, great, Stevie, what do you play? He goes, nothing. Great. Eddie, what do you play? I play the clave. I'm like, all right, we got great beginning going here. So, but nonetheless, we started this Latin salsa band called La Junta del Son, okay, which if you did a search under Latino or Hispanic, you wouldn't find it because it's called La Junta del Son after Son de Solar by Ruben Blades, okay. And we played 3 songs, and man, did we have to practice the 3 songs because we had people who didn't play instruments. I was teaching people how to play different instruments so that during that multicultural weekend, we can play a couple of songs. And our lead singer was none other than Eddie Olivera and Irma Martinez, okay, who sang with us as well. But what was interesting is that was a springboard to some. We had people from other universities who happened to be there that weekend and said, hey, can you come to UPenn and play? Hey, can you come to Williams College and play for our Latin party? And I'm like, we know all of 3 songs. Okay, so this is gonna be, but everybody's like, let's do it, let's do it. So I was like, guys, if we're gonna do this, so we stayed during one of the recess breaks and we would practice every day to learn stuff. And it was a pretty interesting group because we were diverse. We had a Jewish pianist, Hispanic, Mexican, Puerto Rican, Native American, you just named the gamut of African American. We had such a diverse group. And we literally went to Williams College, to UPenn, and we played, and then we started playing more Princeton at some of the salsa parties. So that became such a cool thing for us to do. Alan, that's right, Alan from the Congas, it's because the Jewish conguero. So this became the group that was almost representative of what I felt was a cool thing, because when I came in, I said, oh, I belong over here, and there's all these other places, but we kind of brought them all together to manifest that on campus, because then we were going to these parties that everybody would come in the rotunda, and there was all kinds of people in the rotunda while we were playing. It was tough because, again, as we only knew like 9 songs, we would have to repeat each song like 10 times just to make sure we have enough of a repertoire, but it was a lot of fun. Fast forward a year, we kept the group for a couple of years. I was approached to possibly join a fraternity. And interesting enough, coming from Brooklyn, I was very much in tune with inner city culture. I considered joining an African-American fraternity because I related to the African culture from Brooklyn. And I had a good friend of mine, Dwayne Green from Princeton, tell me, Paul, I'd love to have you as my fraternity brother, but at the same time, you're not Black. So if you could find a fraternity that maybe celebrates your culture and know that, I would tell you to do that. Otherwise, I'd welcome you. So I started researching, and we started our first Latino fraternity. We just started, it had been funded at Cornell University, but we researched out, we pledged at UPenn, we would travel to UPenn every weekend, and there was a group of us in those Recuerdos. The history that Rick has is a picture of us. There's Jose Feliciano, Luis Gallegos, Luis Colon, Kevin Gonzalez, and myself, which are the original founding father line of Princeton, La Unidad Latina, LUL, Lambda Lambda fraternity. We had mixed reception from the community, both Latino and not Latino, because we pledged old school, which was very military. It was definitely a growing experience for us. We grew close to each other, and we as Amparo said, we didn't need everybody's approval. We were pretty sure who we were. I give kudos to Kevin and Jose because they had no idea what they were getting into coming from Puerto Rico, because it was pledged very much the traditional African-American fraternity style, which is all military style. They had no clue what we were doing and they stuck it out and they did it. So I'm honored to call them fraternity brothers, but Princeton brothers as well for a long time. So it was a time of growth. And then we had protests and things of that nature. So I think the 90s was a very interesting decade because I think it allowed us to really expand who we are. Was it perfect? No. Was there a lot of reaching out that we still had to do? I felt the mission to reach out, so I started working with the admissions office because I said, man, there's got to be more inner city Puerto Ricans coming to this place. You know, there cannot just be a few of us. And I'm sure there were more, but we weren't. You know, Acción Puertorriqueña was predominantly island Puerto Ricans, which is fine. Chicano Caucus, obviously mostly Chicano Mexican Americans. And I'm just floating somewhere in between there because I related more with the Mexican American inner city culture as far as the mainland, but I'm of Puerto Rican descent. I don't know. Okay, and then I'm Cuban too, so where does that fit that? So it was an interesting time, but I was very grateful. You know, was it the easiest time? No, I had a lot of friends who I know had challenges. You know, a lot of my classmates actually took time off, didn't graduate with me because they missed home. And they said, this is different. We're coming from a different place where we're maybe the majority, or we don't feel the same, or we're far away, or we miss la cultura and all that kind of stuff. You know, I was very fortunate to stick it out and find some people and find these other outlets that helped me keep going. But, you know, we all had different experiences. I'm very grateful. The other day I was talking to another alum who said, I really didn't like Princeton at all. And I've heard that. You know, we were doing a survey and there was some that said, I didn't really feel like I belong as Latino. I really didn't connect with the Latino community. So I just want to thank Rick and Juana and Margaret for leading this charge, because I think this brings us together. It highlights, while we are all very different in where we came from, and even where we are today. Today, I'm an entrepreneur. I own my own investment company. I live in Florida. You know, and Amparo says she was so sorry for that. You know, in the middle of the pandemic and the heat. It's okay. I'm safe, and we can actually have a life here in Orlando. But we were able to celebrate our differences in a great way, and see where we've all come from and what we've all become in a great way in life. So I'm going to keep that short so I can give other people a chance to talk. Rick, is that good?
Yep. Well, we thank you, Paula. I definitely learned a lot about you in that. What we're going to do, we're going to do a little bit of like a popcorn and kind of go back and forth across the years. And if okay, we can go with Vanessa next, and then after Vanessa, maybe go to Jose. And I'll announce the next person in advance so that he or she can kind of be thinking about their own recuerdo. But Vanessa from class of '99.
Hi, I might have to keep it short because I have a toddler here. This is Jorge Andres. He's 2 and he's hungry. Dile hola. Hola. I'm from Puerto Rico, class of '99. For me, Princeton was amazing. And to this day, probably one of the best experiences of my life. I did learn a lot. I mean, I was very involved in Acción. I think I was historian or something. Was that Nydia at the beginning? And then I was in Body Hype with Juan Esteban right over there. And so I had like different groups. My mom's from Louisiana, my dad's Puerto Rican, and I was raised in Puerto Rico. So I always had kind of like many different groups of friends on campus. But I discovered the Chicano caucus, which was something very new to me. And he's destroying our table right now. I'm sorry, he's trying. What's interesting, Amparo, is I hear your story, and right now I teach at San Jose State, and the majority of my students are first generation, mostly from Watsonville, mostly from farms, but a few do come from LA. And so what's amazing is that I went, just hearing your stories, I went from somebody who didn't really know what the Mexican-American Chicana experience was to somebody who connects with it profoundly and teaches Spanish and always encourages my students to speak Spanglish in class. Because I remember getting to Princeton and reading Borderlands La Frontera for probably my favorite class was, ay Dios mío, it was Religion in the Latin American Imagination. Nidia, tú cogiste esa, ¿verdad? Conmigo y Bea. And it was David Carrasco, who was also head of Rocky Maddie College, and I was in Rocky. To this day, like that is like one of the class. I teach Eduardo Galeano now. We read Memory of Fire, and he invited a singer who performed the moment in which Juan Diego saw the Virgen de Guadalupe. And it was something that was like, Juan Diego. I don't know what the song was, but to this day, I remember the guy in class and learning about Fidel Castro's charisma. It was a fascinating experience. I was a minor in Latin American studies because that was the only option. I believe now you can major in, there's like a whole department, which is huge. And of course, I was so innocent. You know, I didn't realize the politics of departmental divisions and the names of departments and why was there a Romance languages department? And it was very, you know, but I was very naive back in the day. Now I'm a professor, so I know the other side. Yeah, I could go on, but I know there's a lot of us and I don't want to take your time, but I am so excited that you guys did this. I shared with as many people as I could to try to get them to sign on. Adi Martinez is busy taking care of her abuelito, so she couldn't make it, and Nanette is with her kids, so she couldn't make it either. But I'm writing everybody's names down, and if it's okay, I'm going to try to connect with you at least on LinkedIn, those of you who were not connected, just to keep the conversation going. So cuídense, and if there's anything I can do, or if you need anything from me, aquí con mucho gusto.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. Thank you. I appreciate that. No, we can go to, and I mean, to Vanessa's point, that we have about an hour left, and there's maybe 8 or 9 people who from the 90s or who were there in the 90s that we'd like to hear from. So we can stay about 5 minutes a person or so, maybe a little bit under. But we'll go to Jose Pavón, and then we can go to Jerry Garcia.
Excelente. ¿Me escuchan? ¿Me escuchan?
Sí.
Excelente. Wow, me veo doble en la cámara. Interesante. I know a lot of us have been doing this in English. Yo pienso en español, yo hablo en español, voy a hablar en español, espero que eso esté bien. Sí, sería preferible hablar Spanglish o inglés, but that's fine too. Yo quiero agradecer a Amparo, Ricardo, de todo el mundo, Margaret, María Pavón, Alpa. Esto está bien chévere. Estas actividades que están haciendo. Estoy en Puerto Rico, estoy en el balcón de una amistad. María estuvo aquí hasta hace par de días. Qué chévere. Estas reuniones, estos recuerdos son importantes, yo pienso, en mi opinión. Y está chévere que estamos haciendo este esfuerzo para acordar, para, como dijo Ricardo, el bookkeeping, decir nuestra historia important, right? Como ese movimiento el momento Black Lives Matter, completamente de acuerdo. Después, ¿verdad? Puerto Rican Lives Matter, Latino Lives Matter. Y nuestras experiencias, they should have mattered, they did matter, and they will matter, ¿verdad? El Spanglish volvió, no matter what. Yo soy un estudiante que yo tengo 2 class years. Yo soy clase del 97 y también soy clase del 2019, 2020. Algunos quizás ya habían escuchado los Trials and Tribulations, pero sí, la primera vez que llegué a Princeton, it did not, quote unquote, no funcionó para mí. Yo que mi año senior no funcionó, no pude graduarme con mi clase, eso para mí fue difícil. Mis amistades en el momento, entiendo Juan Esteban Goitía, que está por ahí, y todos los otros, se le hacía difícil entender porque yo no estaba ahí con ellos cuando yo estaba con ellos antes y no me gradué con la gente que me quería graduar. Eso fue difícil para mí. En eso, Princeton no me ayudó mucho en eso. Fue un sitio bastante intransigente, difícil, quiero decir un poco clasista, racista. Me sentí que no estaban siendo quizás enteramente justo conmigo y estoy consciente de que esto está siendo grabado, pero pues esa fue mi realidad y así la hablo. Pero 25 años después, las circunstancias cambiaron. Yo estoy en Puerto Rico y ocurrieron los desastres, los huracanes, y nos vemos en necesidad de mudarnos y de buscar una vida diferente. Y Princeton, de verdad, en ese momento, en el 2018, 2019, Princeton fue mucho más diferente para mí y me aceptaron, me acogieron, entre comillas, con los brazos abiertos. Y pues volví. Yo cursé Princeton 2 veces. Yo tuve dos. I went to college twice, yo le digo a la gente. Una vez en el 1995, 97 y otra vez en el 2020, cuando me gradué de Princeton. Y muy orgulloso de graduarme en general y doblemente de graduarme siendo un viejo. Le he preguntado a todo el mundo, incluyendo a Margaret Miller, la vicepresidenta de la Alumni Council. Y pues todo el mundo me dice que sí, que piensa que yo soy el graduando. No soy el graduando más mayor en edad, porque hubo gente que se fue a la guerra mundial, volvió y se graduaron a los 60 años. Pero definitivamente soy el puertorriqueño y el puertorriqueño del departamento de matemáticas mayor que se graduó allí en Princeton. So, that was nice. No he hecho mi recuerdo para lo del el esfuerzo que estamos haciendo en lo de ALPA. He estado flaqueando, lo admito. Estoy en un programa de escuela graduado. Esa es la excusa, pero cuando dejé la excusa voy a hacer mi recuerdo. La verdad es que en el 1990 no había mucha explicación. Era difícil lograr manejar las circunstancias en Princeton. Yo llegué por la situación que teníamos en mi familia, pues quizás le pidieron a mi mamá que pagara $1,000, $2,000. El resto era todo financial aid. ¿Verdad? Ustedes lo saben, ustedes estuvieron allí, need base, las cosas han cambiado. Para ustedes de los 90, I'm happy to report que ahora ya no dan préstamos. Yo tuve que coger préstamos y pagarlos en 1990 y algo. Ya no lo hacen. Ya, if you need money, they just give it to you. Te la dan, y eso fue lo que hicieron ahora cuando yo volví. Pero sí, aquel momento, pues, cogí préstamos y los pagué y me requirieron trabajar y trabajé. Trabajé en el dish room de Wilson Butler, ¿no? Limpiando platos 20, 30 horas a la semana, y volviendo con el tema de que un jíbaro de Puerto Rico que no sabe lo que está pasando, me dijeron que tenía que trabajar, pero no me dijeron qué tenía que hacer. So, esta va a ser mi, quote unquote, mi anécdota curiosa para esta llamada, I guess. Si lo otro que he dicho no es tan interesante y no nos aburre mucho, apologies in advance. Yo fui en mi último día de mi año freshman de Princeton. Yo entré allí en New South con un cheque en mi mano de $3,000, $4,000, y le digo al señor de la entrada, a la señora americana, hi, I'm on work study, I work. Ajá, sí, yo, here's the money I earned. What do you mean? Yo, cada centavo que yo me gané en el dish mi primer año, yo asumía que eso era para pagar la escuela. Yo no gasté nada. Y yo llego allí con ese cheque y el señor me dice, what do you mean? Ve ahí tiene, alguien está diciendo que hicieron lo mismo. Es que no explican, nunca explicaron. Y el tipo me dijo, how did you buy a book? How did you get food? This money was meant for you to live. I managed. Así son los, ¿verdad? Así somos nosotros, los latinos, los puertorriqueños. Nosotros nos dicen que tenemos que get the job done, and we got it done. I did got it done, you know. Mi mamá was very happy to have that money when cuando volví para atrás. No, mira, estos chavos parece que eran para nosotros, y ya los estamos viviendo. So, gracias a todo el mundo en ALPA, a la directiva, gracias especialmente a María Mercedes, mi hermana, que está en la directiva también de ALPA, y siempre me está guiando y llevando hacia adelante. Gracias por hacer esto, y estaré participando. Gracias por escuchar. Buenas noches.
Gracias, Jose. Gracias. Now we're going to go to, we said we go to Jerry next, and then maybe after Jerry, we can go to Juana.
All right, so hi guys, can you see me? There we go.
Yes.
So thanks for putting me on the spot, Ricardo. I'm Jerry, class of 94, former, so I grew up in South Texas. Ricardo and I grew up not that far away from each other. I'm out from outside of Corpus Christi, small town. And I'm going to be very quick. When I was there, we were fortunate enough to get to host one of the Thanksgiving pachangas, which are apparently no longer hosted at Thanksgiving. But Amparo mentioned that she helped recruit David Carrasco. And in 1992, we hosted Pachanga, and David Carrasco got his audition to finally become a professor at Princeton, and now he's over at Harvard. And also, we had Dr. Loco and the Crazy Jalapeno Band
Hables.
flown out from California to play at Pachanga at the Third World Center. Michael Rodriguez was the director of TWC at that point, and he got to sign the contract. And Dr. Loco had a clause in his contract that said that they needed a private room stocked with booze. And so Michael had to go out and stock up that private room at TWC for Dr. Loco and the whole Jalapeno Band to drink up during their breaks and before and after. So I think Michael looked at contracts a lot closer since then. The only other thing I'd add is that at that point, when I was there somewhere, 90 to 94, we started having a discussion about why TWC was called the Third World Center. Because we weren't third world people, right? And so nothing really germinated from that conversation, but that conversation started. And like, I thought watching the 70s discussion was really fascinating because they're the ones that helped conceive of the idea of TWC. So that's all I wanted to share. Ricardo, thank you very much. And it's lovely seeing everyone.
Thank you, Jerry. Thank you. We'll have to talk to South Texas alumni group a little bit later. And so we're going to Juana, and then maybe after Juana, we can go to Ruben and then Irma. But and recall, we have 40 minutes or so we'll keep it in that 5-minute range.
Make it real fast, I promise. So anyway, thank you so much, Margaret and Ruben, for this. It's been a voyage that I've had with Ricardo on this project, and I'm so excited that it's coming to life. So I was born and raised in Washington, D.C. Things that maybe I haven't shared with people because there's never been a reason to is I didn't speak until I was almost 8 years old. That was something that it was just, I didn't do it. I don't recall wanting to not speak, but I just didn't. I'm Ecuadorian American, and in my background, being raised in Washington, D.C., neither of my parents read or write in either language. So it was a little bit of a struggle on, education, etc. And in Washington, D.C. public schools, I was referred to as the only white kid. And so there was some serious sort of identity issues upon entering Princeton. Took it from wanting to lose all accents, right? Make sure that nobody could identify where I was from or my background based on how I spoke, and kind of trying to be sort of ethnic neutral is how I made it through high school. When I got there, I had just desired to be an astronaut, right? That was my goal. So I was a mechanical and aerospace engineer and thought that was, very exciting until physics, differential equations, and all those other classes kicked in. And I realized that maybe there was another plan for me. Maybe I was meant to be at Princeton to meet all of you guys. Several of you on this call were critical to me, important to me in different ways. Paul Roldan, Amparo. That's why, I wanted you guys to be the chairs of this particular conversation, because you were, both of you, very critical to my understanding of what it meant to be a Latina and to be a Princetonian and to be sort of committed to to different causes. So I kind of dipped in and out, you know, long story short, I never became an astronaut or an engineer. I did the 5-year plan. My dad had a stroke, so I had to take time off and kind of handle, you know, family issues. But I would say that Princeton took the time to ensure that I came back. They aggressively called, you know, I was never recruited at the front end, right? I don't know how I got in. I'm a good test taker, right? I think it was the SAT was probably the thing. But other than that, I mean, painfully shy, that not talking thing came back in when I got into Princeton, because I think it was the trauma of not sort of understanding, you know, what is this environment about? Fast forward, one of the people Amparo mentioned was Antonia Hernandez. And the one thing I did have by senior year was a car. So I used that car to do whatever I needed to do. I became a minority affairs advisor in the residential college for a little while, and was able to interact with a lot of these peers that are on the call today and others that hopefully will be on future calls. And what I did with that vehicle was it allowed me to drive people back and forth, to make relationships, to help people get to the airport, to get home. I was able to kind of pay back friends. Like Juan Pantoja was a great friend to me. You know, he was the other JP is the name we would call each other. He would call me JP1 and he was JP2. And, you know, he would make sure I would get to class and I would make sure he got to the airport. So we all had these very unique relationships. But long story short, I ended up majoring in Romance languages and literatures. And for me, that was just a means of getting to the end, right? I wanted to graduate and say, I did it. It was an amazing experience. And if I can do this, I can do anything. And it really set the stage for making sure that, you know, when I start something, I want to finish it. And for everybody on the line, by the way, I have pneumonia and like a fever right now. So that's why my voice is coming and going. And plus you all make me very emotional. But so thank you for listening to me. But more importantly, I would like all of you guys to take time to reach out to Margaret, Ricardo, and myself. We're doing one-on-one interviews to hear your individual stories, to understand, you know, why you love or don't love Princeton, or why you love your Princeton experience and what it meant to you. For me, it really culminated in understanding that I can do anything I set out to do. I can finish it and I can thrive and I can take that moment. So the full circle of the car and Antonia Hernandez, the story there was that I drove her to the train station in like the last week of my senior year. And I knew that was my only shot to speak to a leader like that and say, hey, I need your help. I need your guidance. And, you know, and that ride to the train station, she asked me, what do you need? And I said, I need a job. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, I need a job next week after I graduate. And that really became the road to understanding. She was my first mentor. She explained to me what it meant to be a Latina, to live a life of activism. I saw Amparo and Anna and Irma and all these amazing women around me. And then I saw an older version of them and said, somewhere in between that is my path. And so while I never became an astronaut, I did really commit to this life of wanting to use what Princeton allowed me to learn and affect positive change on as many people as possible. So I'm gonna go take my meds now, and thank you all for listening to me and indulging me and sharing your journeys with me as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Juana. One of the great things about being involved in this effort is meeting people, and there's so many people on this call who I can call really good friends. And let's be clear, we're all storytellers. It came up in the 80s about, I'm not a storyteller, but no, we are storytellers and we have stories to tell. And it's important that we do. And so please, thank you, Juana and all. Let's go to Ruben, and then we can take a photo, and then we'll go to Irma, if that's okay with folks. So Ruben Flores?
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. So I'm Ruben Flores. I'm from El Paso, Texas. I am both a member of the class of 89 and 94. So I entered in 85. That doesn't mean I graduated with both. I entered with the class of 89, but after my sophomore year, I left for 5 years. My mother was very ill. She had cancer, and she passed away, unfortunately, before I graduated in 94. But I felt a lot of guilt at the time at the amount of money that my parents were paying for me to attend Princeton. And so I left and I joined the US Army. And so for 5 years, I was in Texas and California and Georgia. And I used the Army College Fund to go back to Princeton starting in 92. And I graduated in 94 with a degree in history. My two experiences, I think, are radically different because of the military. I'd never been away from home. And so I think like many of us felt, especially those of us who were first generation college student away from home for the first time, I did feel like a fish out of water. And yet there was something about the academic culture that I loved and that I recognized. My time in the military really matured me an awful lot. And it gave me a comparative case. You know, I was able to test people from many different parts of the world in a different way from Princeton. I still look back on those two experiences and I'm always comparing them to each other. I graduated in 94 and my junior and senior year was just one wonderful sort of intellectual banquet. I was there the day that Toni Morrison won the Nobel Prize for Literature, and Christine Stansel announced it to our class. It was a class on women and gender, and I'll never forget. She said, "Oh, fellow Ohioan has just won the Literature Prize," right? But there's Andrew Wiles solved Fermat's theorem. There was a Nobel Prize in economics and physics. But my favorite moment was in Professor Marchand's class. She was in the history department, and she was a European intellectual historian. And she used to play music, 18th and 19th century symphonies, and explain them historically to us. And I'll just never forget how much fun she would have doing that. And I decided that I wanted to be a historian. So after I left Princeton, I went to UC Berkeley, and I have a PhD in US and Mexican history. And I now teach both fields at the University of Rochester in New York. I look back on Princeton, I have so many wonderful memories. It's taken me a very, very long time to reach back and make contact with people individually. But I cannot claim that it didn't fashion me and form me in some very good ways. I'm so proud of my classmates, of you all, because the people that you have become are remarkable to me. You know, I love meeting. I went to the reunion for the 80s group in Austin last week, and it was such a pleasure to meet everybody's children, you know, and reconnect. And we just sat by the lake and just talked into the night, and it was just wonderful. So yeah, I think I'll echo what other people said. If I can ever do anything for you, please let me know. I'm you know, on the Rochester email server. I'm very, very interested in college students, of course, and I see my students today, you know, through the lens of the person that I was back when. I try to do as much as possible for them, and including, you know, building tight relationships with them so that they can continue forward. Yeah. But it's great to see you all, and I hope to see you live in person sometime.
Reunions. Thank you, Ruben. Hey, for those of you who don't have your camera on, if as we take the picture, if you want to put your camera on for the picture, and then we'll go with Irma, and then after Irma, perhaps we can go to David and then Jessica, if okay with folks. But let's all take a picture first.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great, everybody. What a beautiful, whoops, somebody's not on mute, sorry. Beautiful crowd. So we'll go on 3. 1, 2, 3.
Great,
Lovely.
thank you.
We'll do number 1. I'm going to do it one more time just to make sure we get it. Our social media loves your beautiful faces. Oh, and I see a cute, cute baby in there. Hola.
Can I make a quick recommendation?
Yes.
Make sure our names pop up when you take the picture with our
Yeah.
classes.
That's a good
The
idea.
names, sorry, make sure they pop up. Did you say?
Yeah, so
Yeah, because with our
They
class
do.
number. Oh, okay.
Yes, they
Oh,
are.
they
They
do.
are listed.
cool.
And if it's okay with this group, I'll keep them on. Sometimes for privacy sakes, I'll block it out, but for these, I've been keeping them up if that's okay.
Awesome.
Okay, great. And who is next?
Irma.
Ricardo?
Big
Oh,
Dodger
of
fan over
course.
here.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
okay.
I'm originally from LA, but right now I'm in Jersey, which is partly why I wasn't on the camera at the beginning. I'm in my in-laws' home. I totally blanked out about the call, but then while we were having dinner, I listened to, I was like half listening to the family, and then Amparo, and of course, Paul, who's my hermano. Oh my God, love you. Amparo también, but you were ahead of me, Amparo, So I was originally class 92. And at some point I did choose to go with 92 because when I was having coffee with 94 and a 92 person in LA, realized like all my memories of Princeton, most of them are the 92 people, except for Ruben, by the way, who I'm going to a Dodger Mets game with on Saturday, which is cool. Woohoo. But he's 94. So I try to spend some time out here because my husband's originally from Brazil, but his mom and stepdad live here in Jersey. So that actually also facilitates me going a lot to Princeton whenever there's something there, which I love. So where to begin? There's so much, but yeah, I'm gonna try to keep it short. So I'm from East LA. I went to Roosevelt, which is the same Roosevelt High School, the same high school as Amparo, same class of 90, same high school as Jerry Alvarez, class 91. And I always knew I wanted to leave LA and California, but I really didn't know what I was getting into. To say it, it was so naive. But my first visit to Princeton, I loved it. I thought it was like Disneyland. I'm not a big Disneyland fan, but to me, Princeton was like Disneyland. I was hosted by, I don't even know who hosted me, but Amparo was part of it for sure. But I don't actually remember where I stayed, but I remember spending time at Forbes. And I went into the Rocky area, Rocky college. And I was like, what is this place? This is amazing. This place is awesome. And Jerry Alvarez, who was a year ahead of me, who I had classes with in high school, he was there. I know that's who I went to visit. And I ended up at Maddie when I was a freshman, sophomore, which by the way, I got through freshman, sophomore year fine. I mean, relatively fine. I wasn't great. And my best friend, it's funny because my two really best friends from like undergrad, not to offend anyone, like until first year, second year, were really, Paul, because he mentioned inner city, and that's exactly what it was. Like I'm from LA, but my entering class of Chicanos, I really didn't have a lot in common with them. Like in terms of like, of course our Mexican part, but there was no other LA Latino or Latina when I went in. I was so lonely. I'm gonna cry. But when I met Paul, it was like, wow, he gets me. I love all those guys that Amparo mentioned. And Amparo was ahead of me. She was 2 years ahead of me, different. The most of the Chicanos were like guys from Texas, guys from the Northern California, Corina, who's also from Northern California, a couple of gals from Texas, Ana, who, Cabrera, who came in at some point later because she was a transfer student. I'm sure she'll tell you about it. But like no one from LA. I mean, I was so lost. And Paul was awesome. I don't even know how I met you, Paul, but yeah, I mean, he talked about La Junta. I remember, and I love the beginning of it, man, like how Erio and Steve, came up to you. But he knew I liked to sing. So he's like, hey, we're going to do this thing. You want to sing? I'm like, yeah, of course, And yeah, I mean, it was awesome. I mean, awesome. And then of course I had to, halfway through my junior year, I withdrew because when Professor Irby told me, too bad, so sad, there's nothing you can do. I'm gonna fail you. It's not fair for the other class students. You know, I mean, I wasn't doing the work, but at some point I went to tell him, hey, what can I do? He said no, and I didn't want to fail. And I thought, oh, let me withdraw, which is kind of dumb. I don't know. Should have just tried to get a D, which is what I did, by the way, in Econ 101 or 102. I don't know why the hell I was saying that class, but Juan Almaguer, who Amparo mentioned, class 90, he was an Econ major. And I was telling him, I don't know what I'm doing in this freaking class. He's like, you cannot get a fail. And he gave me this tutorial, like, you know, I got a D, I passed, you know. He was awesome. He's like, I forget if I got a C- or D, but whatever. I didn't get a fail because before I talked to him, I was failing. I don't know what I was doing, you know, like econ in high school is not econ at Princeton. Calculus at high school is not calculus at Princeton, right? And by the way, some folks have talked about Espanol, Spanish. When I came into Princeton, I was very proud of the fact that yo hablo español, and I would look down on, especially Chicanos, right, who don't speak Spanish. But because my dad was like that, right? But then one, I learned that my Spanish wasn't all that great. And two, that, hello, what's wrong with Spanglish? And there's plenty of Latinos, Mexican Americans, others who don't speak Spanish. So I became a little bit more open-minded. And then I ended up majoring in Spanish, which was awesome. I did eventually did read some Cervantes and managed to do the thesis on Sor Juana Inés de la Cruz. I started off as a history major. I wasn't as talented as Ruben, because Ruben, by the way, he didn't mention, but he graduated with honors in history. So I'm sure the history department was happy to let me go, and I did romance languages. And when I first got out of Princeton, I was living in DC for about 5 years. My Spanish was awesome. People were like, ¿de dónde eres? ¿Eres colombiana? ¿Eres venezolana? ¿Eres? For whatever reason, a Mexican can't speak Spanish, you know, like the people are clueless, right? And I have a story to tell, maybe in the next Recuerdos, that Edio, what does it say, David Morales? Oh my God, that's David Morales?
Yeah, and he's
oh
next.
My God, dude, Edio. David Morales, so I have a story about that. When somebody was talking about getting people to the airport, remember, David, our story about the airport? You probably don't remember. I was living in Henry Hall, and he was going to take me because he was like one of the few Latinos who had a car at Princeton. Who had a car? I don't know. He had a car. He's from California. He was going to take me to the airport, and I overslept or whatever. So next thing you know, like he's knocking on my window at Henry Hall, it was along the, I forget the name of the street, Alexander Street, whatever.
Elm.
What?
Oh no, Elm, but no, it was
Alexander Road.
Yeah.
Alexander Road, that
Alexander.
one. He's knocking, and oh my God, yes, I'm late. And I like packed my bag and I threw my bag through the window, you know, and yeah, that was awesome. So he got me to my flight. But yeah, I met David and oh my God, from Durango, Colorado, Ray Rodriguez, my freshman year. Ray was awesome.
Yep.
What a guy. Like those guys helped me so much. And then don't interrupt me, Ricardo. You haven't interrupted anybody. I'll wrap it up right now. And then Juan Pantoja. I cannot not talk about Juan Pantoja. I'm probably gonna start crying, but he was amazing, just an amazing person. And whatever we have to remember him. He was awesome, and he ended up establishing himself in LA. But anyway, I remember a story about Juan is like he was on campus club, and one time he invited me. I mean, he's invited me several times to his club to have dinner or lunch, and then I get there and he's not there. He overslept. Oh my God, I'm so sorry. And just funny guy, great person. Won the grito contest one time at the Pachanga. I think it was at MIT or Harvard. And yeah, the Junta is a highlight, of course. And also and I think Paul talked about the African-American connection. And like for me, the group that helped me too was the gospel choir. And I thought about joining a sorority too, but one of the Black women said, well, the people are gonna think you want to steal their men. So that was that.
Well,
And I wasn't as cool and inspired as Paul to start my own, sorority. But and yeah, and also the other thing that I stands out to me is, yeah, I definitely didn't know any Puerto Ricans before I went to Princeton. And of course, I just mentioned Paul, and then I didn't tell you the other part is Alice Rivera, 92. She was my hermana. She's now here in LA. Beautiful person. When I first met her, I thought she was a little stuck up little bee. And I always tell that story. We laugh. She comes, from a okay, well-off family and not me on the other end, but we were the best of friends. And that's the thing that I realized at Princeton, that I can get along with so many types of people, but for a while, I didn't understand that. I was too naive, too scared of white people, too scared of wealthy people, but we're all people, and obviously we are unique. I am never going to be the kind that's going to say that the Latino graduation should cease. No, we have, I think it was, I don't know if it was Jose or someone, that we have a story. I'll have a story to tell, our Latino story, our Mexican-American, Puerto Rican, Ecuadorian, but in the end, there's something very that unifies us. But anyway, I'll shut up now. There's so much to say, but I want to listen to you guys, and love you guys. And I have to represent, even though I'm in Jersey.
I'm fortunate enough to have served on the ALPA board with Irma for many years, and she's absolutely wonderful. We had dinner last week, so great. I'm glad your travels are going well. Now, and we're going to go over. I apologize, and I think we need to start making these longer than an hour and a half. But we're going to go with David, and then maybe Jessica, and then maybe Nidia, if that's okay with folks. But David, you were just referenced from Irma, so it's great that you're going next.
Yeah, no, it's awesome to see you. No, Irma was a huge, actually, she won't know this, but she was actually a huge part of my experience at Princeton, because we only overlapped 1 year. So she was really instrumental in terms of me having some connection, some community at the school. I mean, actually that year there were a couple Latinos at the Woodrow Wilson School. I was a grad student there, and so that there was some connection there, but they were only there, I think, like 1 semester because they were MPA JDs. And my experience at Princeton was, I think pretty similar to a lot of people. It's pretty isolating. My first year, it was a total bummer. I mean, there weren't really any Latino students that I knew, and so it wasn't until my second year when I met Irma that things really started to look up, and I felt much more connected and had some community and support. So, I mean, she had lots of other friends, but in the community, so it was very different. So she doesn't realize how big she was in my life. So in terms of my background, I'm actually from LA, originally from East LA, where my parents grew up, and my grandparents were there since like the 20s and 30s. And they were in politics and business in East LA. But my parents, they ended up moving us out of East LA, and I ended up going to a fancy school in Pasadena, where I was one of a couple of Latino students. So I kind of had the Princeton experience early, like pre-adolescent. So feeling like an outsider, and I didn't fit, didn't belong, and hearing comments and stuff. So it was pretty rough on my self-esteem. To be in that situation. So I totally identify with what a lot of people have talked about. So I had that experience in, majority situation. And then I went to take a math class because I was into math. So for fun over the summer, I decided I wanted to take a math class. And so I went to East LA College, where my dad taught. And instead of taking a regular ELAC course, they stuck me in the Garfield Math Magnet. And that was kind of life-changing for me. So that was in '84. So I was a student of Jaime Escalante then, and then a teaching assistant the next year. But that was the first time when I was in a majority minority situation. And it's all these like phenomenal kids from Garfield and Roosevelt. I lived by Garfield, when I was little. That's where my dad's office was. That's the community I was from. Anyway, so it was just amazing. Just opened my eyes, like, why do I have to feel like I'm less than because I'm Chicano? For all these, brilliant Latinos, were just as smart or smarter than other people. So it kind of changed my life. So I went back to my school as a senior. I'm like becoming very political and started studying like the Chicano movement and becoming more active in the community. And then went off to school. I was luckily, I actually got admitted to Princeton engineering, and Martin Gutierrez hosted me. And I was really looking forward to, being active in the Chicano caucus and stuff. And we ended up, I ended up going somewhere else, but I dated somebody that I met there that week. So I spent like over 100 days at Princeton as an undergrad visiting my girlfriend. So it was I had kind of this weird situation. And then I ended up going to Princeton for grad school at Woody Woo, came in 89, took a year off to work and came back and finished 91, 92. And luckily there were a couple Latinos in my group. Ray Rodriguez was one of them. And Jesus Roman was the other. He's my compadre. But they're great friends, and was able to connect with Irma and the undergrads, which was probably pretty weird for them, because here they have this grad student that's showing up at the TWC to dance ballet folklorico with them. So that was a pretty great experience for me. Yeah, so pretty similar to everyone else. And I attended the other one before, the 80s one, and it seems like a lot of Latinos have a similar experience there, and I'm glad that we have this community and we all made it through and we're hanging together. Since then, I went off and did some engineering and economic work, international development, and went to law school. And I live here in Santa Cruz County, actually Watsonville. And fortunately, over the years, I've been able to maintain my experience in the community by doing civil rights, political work, voting rights work, just general activism and causing trouble. So, Chicano with 3 degrees can really mess people up sometimes. So it's pretty fun. They get pretty upset. Anyway, so it's I'm really, really thankful for you guys for putting this together and for the community that we have here. And I'm glad to be just a small part of it. Thanks.
Thank you, David. Thanks for sharing. And I know you participated in one of our other one of the writing ones, and it's great to hear your story and learn more about you. We need to connect as well. Jessica, Nydia, and then Juan Gotti. I know Juan, you're class of 2000, but you spent the majority of your years in the 90s. So if we could go with, and then Ana Cabrera. Sorry, Ana, but we started the list when before you came on. But if we could go with Jessica, please, and then Nydia, and then Juan, and then Ana. And I think that covers everyone in the 90s who's on the call. Naomi Garcia was on earlier. I think she dropped. But if we could go with that, that'd be great.
Hi, thanks. Jessica Hall, also Hall Valdez. I did add the Valdez because everyone thought I was a white person. Can't imagine how that happened. Anyway, and I am half white. And that was one of the things for me is, a lot of folks are talking about how they got to Princeton and they felt like they didn't fit in. And I felt like I didn't fit in a lot of other ways as well. It's one thing to look like the people around you. And for me, I come from Hawthorne. I grew up in Hawthorne, California, LA area. And I went to Lusinger High School for 3 years. And then I went to a boarding school for 2 years called the United World College. But coming from Hawthorne, I didn't fit in on a racial appearance level, but I understood myself to be part of the community. And more, more to the point, it was a very multiracial place. It wasn't all one thing. And so a lot of the questions about identification where you feel like you're having to take sides on something, that didn't really hit me until I went to the boarding school. And then to get at Princeton, where it was magnified, this idea that you have to be one or the other. And it's not so much it's not so much that it's coming from individuals, it's coming from the larger sense of how do I fit into this place? And when you go to one group of people and you hear people talk a certain way and you're like, ooh, I'm not you. And then you go to another group of people and you hear them talk and you're like, well, you know, you're more like who I know, and you're more like where I'm from. And this is where I feel most comfortable. So I was always in this kind of uncomfortable place, to be honest. And my mother's people were New Mexicans. I'm from California, but my mother's people are New Mexicans. I could, and you know, Nadine Tapia was also from New Mexico, and Luis, and we kind of joke about being primos. And you know, New Mexico is so like small town, and like, you know, I don't want to use the word incestuous, but there's a high likelihood that we actually are primos at some level. And so that was always just a nice thing to have that. And, you know, there were some really sweet folks like Amparo who, you know, definitely would do her job to bring people into the fold. And so in the places and times when I didn't feel like I belonged, you know, Amparo would be there like, you know, get over here, you know, and so something that I really appreciated. And she kept that way and stayed in touch with me even beyond Princeton in ways that was just really nice. But I did get involved in the caucus for a while. Some of you probably remember. And one of the things I'll tell you, so we're here to tell stories. And I mean, look, I really did not enjoy Princeton. I fantasized about leaving all the time. I think every year, at least once, I probably sought paperwork to transfer somewhere else. So that's how I felt about Princeton. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. And you know, and I haven't gotten more sentimental about it with time. So it's still, I pretty much have the same feelings about it that I had. That said, so when I was chairing the caucus for one semester, I mean, as it was, you know, we all told each other stories about the shit that was going on while we were in school. And being the chair of the caucus, I thought, well, this is a moment to try and agitate a little. And so I went to the administration with a couple other folks and said, you know, these are the kinds of stories I'm hearing about discrimination on campus. And these are the things I'm hearing about happening to people. It doesn't happen to me personally, and you know why, right? And got some really interesting, you know, how would I put it? That's so, you know, we wish we could do something about it. We just don't have the evidence. And, you know, we need documentation, or we just can't do anything about it. And I was like, oh, evidence. That's what you need, is evidence. Okay, we can do that. And so I got together with Maria Cordero, who was a graduate student, as well as Eduardo Pagan, another graduate student. And we put together a survey. We kind of corralled Miguel Centeno to help us, you know, kind of give us his opinion about our methodology and everything. And then we kind of ignored his advice. But we did this unveiling of a survey. We had took all year. This was like my unofficial thesis in sociology, because I was an architecture student and I was in studio, by the way, the rest of the time that I was doing this. But we crafted this survey to really document what people now call microaggressions, and to document really overt examples of discrimination. And we got lots of folks, some of you who are on this Zoom, to help us administer the survey by setting up stations all over campus. And so we had people, we had the plan that on a specific day, we would just have these tables everywhere and have people fill out these surveys, just saying, have I experienced XYZ behaviors? Have I experienced all of these things? And how do I feel being here? And as it would happen, the day we unveiled this survey was right after the LA riots. So everyone's feelings about all the shit they put up with was very on, and people were ready to respond. And we got some very powerful data that we were able to pull together and present to the university. And, you know, of course, the first thing the university did was try to discredit it by picking apart our methodology. And I was gone. I'd gone on to graduate school at that point, but Eduardo had been given a position in the administration, and Maria had continued to finish her graduate studies. But, you know, I was told that a different sociology professor, and I know everyone loved him and I can't remember his name, so I apologize. But he apparently assigned our survey as a class project. This is what Eduardo told me later. And so he had them redo it using the proper methodology. I don't think it was Taylor, it was someone else. But anyway, so he had his students redo the survey, and apparently the results pretty much confirmed our findings. So I don't know how much of a difference it made, but if some of you who came later had happier experiences, then maybe it did something. So anyway, that will be my recuerdo for tonight.
Thank you. You know, I thought I read about that in the Princetonia when we were going through the timeline. I was looking for it, but I couldn't find it immediately.
Yeah, you know, Eduardo sent me a copy of it. If I can get it scanned, I'll send it to you.
Great.
There was also a very hostile and angry editorial that I wrote in the Princetonian, which you do not need to reprint. It's quite okay.
Maybe that's what I'm thinking of. There's something in there with your name on there.
Oh, there's a rant. For sure.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, thank you for sharing. Now we're going to Nydia and then Juan and then Ana. And I think that covers everyone from the 90s and leading into the zeros. Is that correct? And we're just a few minutes over, so hopefully folks can stay. I know we've lost a couple of folks already, but apologies about the draw. Nydia, please.
Hey everybody, my name is Nydia Mancini, class of 99. I'm glad to be here and I've really enjoyed hearing all of your personal anecdotes. It really resonates with me, and especially the topic of identity. I was born in New Jersey and I'm half Puerto Rican, half Italian American. I moved to Puerto Rico when I was 8 and I grew up there. So I was fully immersed in the island culture, with trips back and forth to New Jersey, of course, to see family. So when I arrived at Princeton, it was a unique experience. I will say to an extent, it was somewhat of a culture shock because even though I was born in New Jersey and have family there, it was just a whole new world in terms of the people. And as you've all mentioned, all of these nuances of island Puerto Rican, Chicano, white people, and I'm a multifaceted person. I love to sing and dance. I was in Black Arts Company as a dancer choreographer, Acción Puertorriqueña y Amigos. You guys mentioned work study. So one thing I would love to highlight is one experience I had as a work study student. So I was really lucky because I speak Spanish. I was assigned to work in Firestone Library under the bibliographer for Latin America, Spain, and Portugal. And my sophomore year, one of the assignments I was able to get paid to do was to interview Latino alumni for Princeton. And those interviews were recorded. And it's a really funny story. Like, this isn't just the highlight. It was fascinating to hear the story of Latinos from I was a sophomore, 1997. Hear stories from Latinos from the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, and early 90s, and what it was like, especially because, as we all know, way back in the day, there was no women, there was very few African-American, very few Latinos. So all of that was relatively new. So for me, as a young sophomore, to have these conversations was wonderful. So I majored in English with a certificate in Latin American Studies. I attended Pachanga, which I loved, studied abroad in Spain. I truly don't know what had happened with these manuscripts and this research I had done, because it was in conjunction, as I said, with Firestone Library and with Nelly Gorbea, who was one of the alumni from the
80s, 88, 89.
Yes. So I graduated. And you know how life is, takes you in a different direction. Went to law school at University of Puerto Rico, did that for a while. I'm now a pharmacist, and that's a whole other story, whole other journey. But a few years ago, I was contacted from Princeton about these interviews and all of this research. And I think it had a lot to do with the fact that Sonia Sotomayor was now Supreme Court Justice, because she was one of the alumni that I had also interviewed. So long story short, all of this information was just discovered, and there's an article on it. You guys can read it. I'll forward it to you, but it's really a fascinating story because all of this, at first they couldn't even open it. It was all on a floppy disk from the 90s. And then eventually they were able to get the interviews, which I have now listened to, and my voice, I sound like no offense to the California people, but I sound like a Valley Girl teenager. Like I was, maybe 20 years old, but my voice sounds like I'm 16, and I'm interviewing all of these alumni. And there's even the draft of what I wrote, which as a now English, graduated English major, there were typos and all of that, but disclaimer, that was a draft. But anyway, so that's the long story. And I know we're short on time. I've loved all of your stories, and I hope you've enjoyed mine.
Definitely. We need to get your article and we need to get those tapes. That'd be a great add to our project. Definitely.
Sure. And I know there's another student that picked back up with it because, to make a long story short, the reason Princeton was doing that is because there was this document called a Princeton Companion, and it used to talk about like the eating clubs and the departments and all of these things, but there was nothing about Los Latinos. And so that was the whole goal. But something happened. As I said, it never happened. And then it was supposed to be redone. And I don't know what's happened because it was assigned to someone else.
We'll look into that, definitely. We'll go to Juan.
Yes. So thank you so much, everybody, for tonight. It's wonderful to hear all your stories. I'm going to be very quick because Eddie Oliveira is his birthday. He's just joined. So I'm sure that everyone's dying to hear from Eddie. So that's why I'm going to cede my turn to Eddie. But anyway, I had a wonderful experience at Princeton. And I think most of that was that I was at Forbes College. So immediately I was part of this microculture where they just stressed that from the beginning. So not only was I from Forbes College, but also I was very fortunate to have upperclassmen that really showed me the way. I see Nidia, I see Vanessa, and then like them, we were blessed that we were at the time where there were a lot of Puerto Ricans and also a lot of Chicanos. I think a month into my time at Princeton, we had the Acción Puertorriqueña and Chicano, we played football, tackle football. So it was a painful experience. It was a bloody experience. But then after that, what was funny is that we kept on seeing each other at Mass. And then that sense of community was so powerful because it healed everything. And not only our wounds, but it really strengthened our time, and really Acción and the Chicano Caucus, we were very active, but at the same time, we were very supportive of each other. So it's not that, oh, what's the Acción doing? And so also that had to do a lot with the leadership. So I think that was very helpful too. Anyway, I'm going to stop here. I want Eddie to join, but what I'm going to say is that what's really wonderful about Recuerdos, and I thank Margaret, Ricardo, Juana, is that, and about our Princeton experience, is that we continue to make more Recuerdos. And the 4 years is this really lifetime bond that we have, and we're living it right now, but then we continue to make Recuerdos as we speak. So with that, I'll let Eddie take it over.
Well, we're going to go to Ana next.
Sorry.
If that's okay, and then we can do Eddie, and we can sing happy birthday to Eddie. But speaking of Recuerdos, I always remember the first time I met Ana, and I haven't been to Jersey recently. Juana, we need to have a drink again. Ana, we need to have a drink again soon. But Ana, please share your story.
Hey y'all, I'm actually in California now, Ricardo. I'm only 50 miles away from you. When I can get out of the house, I feel like I'm trapped in the house often. But yeah. So hi everyone. I was listening in from the beginning. I just had to go to the pharmacy, so I was on the phone. Yeah, Recuerdos are a hard thing for me because I did not have fun at Princeton. I mean, I did. Let's be clear. I did with the friends that are here with me. You know when I had fun. But honestly, Princeton was a very hard place for me in lots of ways. I can tell you I had the same experience as Amparo getting there. It was a rough entry. Only I had the added that my parents were very angry at me for going away to go to school and had chosen to not support me financially as a way of demonstrating their displeasure. So when I was on campus, I worked a lot. I had many jobs. And even so, at the end of my first semester, Princeton tried to send me home because I needed $1,000 more to pay my tuition. But they refused to up my loans, even though I told them that my parents were not paying. Like other folks who had to actually leave because their parents refused to pay if they didn't do what they wanted. I stuck it out. You know, a lot of folks will say Princeton made them. I came to Princeton fully formed. I learned a lot there. I met a lot of good people. But when they told me that they were going to send me home, I walked into Ada Video's office. She was our token dean at the time, but she was wonderful. And I told her, and I said, I'm doing well. I'm getting really good grades, and they want to send me home for $1,000 that I'm happy to take out as a loan. And everybody knows Vilma, and she had helped me as much as she could in the financial aid office. And Ada talked to Don Betterton, who talked to somebody else, and then I became the bad person in the financial aid office. I was only allowed to speak to one person, but they gave me the loan. And it worked out. And I marched into the office across the way from financial aid, which was student employment. And I said, excuse me, but I need my work study now to be in the financial aid office, because I needed them to see who I was, how on a piece of paper. And I won those ladies over. Still friends with some of them. Highlights, I guess. I know I took a break from writing my thesis to stand out and collect racial harassment stories. That was a lot of fun, especially the white folks who came up to me and told me that they felt harassed when Black students sat at a table by themselves in the cafeteria. But Jessica doesn't remember this, but I remember sitting in Ruth Simmons' living room on the floor with a bunch of other folks after the survey came out, when she wanted to know about specific things that we had talked about, like the walk of shame, when your financial aid wasn't filled out and you had to go all the way from New South back over to West College to get somebody to give you an extra $500 loan. Ridiculous when Princeton had so much money. So a couple of things did come out of that, but we did what we did, and I was very active. I don't know how many committees I was on, so that other folks would not have to go through what we went through. And I think it may be better now, although I've heard a lot of different stories from different students. So I think it's important to truth tell. I think it's important to tell when things were hard and how we got through. And the fact that we didn't always stand up for each other. I mean, somebody referenced that I wasn't there.
Did it freeze?
I think it did.
I think her internet froze.
Whoops.
Anna, you froze. If you can hear us.
She may have to drop out and join again.
Wow. That's, yeah, maybe we can come. Yeah, she dropped off. But wow. And we'll have to continue that later. And maybe that survey, Jessica, I'd be really curious to hear and understand that better. But until Anna comes back, let's go back to Eddie. And Eddie, so it's your birthday?
Man, 51 years old.
Eddie
51. I just left the drive-through at Walgreens for my medications and shit.
Oh no. Feliz cumpleaños. Feliz cumpleaños.
Gracias. Thank you, everyone. I just really appreciate this meeting. I want to thank Juan Goitia for reminding me of it. I was busy with the family celebrating my birthday, but I wanted to come in and give a shout out to all of you. What Anna shared was amazing.
Sorry, guys, my internet crapped out. I just want to say I'm still here and listening. Hey, Eddie, and happy birthday.
Anna, thank you. What you share is amazing, because I think at 51, I can tell you, I mean, life is a composition of the good and the bad, and we have to, look at everything, look at the whole picture, you know, and yeah, because of people like you and others that we were around those time in the 90s, I think a lot of the things that maybe other people can enjoy today and other legacies that the university itself can be proud of is because of efforts that many of us in this call and others made. And also we had a lot of great conspirators, you know. I can think of Father Floyd Tompkins, Father William Gibson, Father Bob Ferrick from Aquinas. I can think of even Dean Muriel Whitcomb, who, you know, even when she couldn't, I remember her secretary, Terry Van something or other, her secretary, she'd say, hey, did you have a great time for Christmas? Did you and your family have a lot of tacos? And you had your, you know, and I'm like, yeah, in Puerto Rico, yeah, we don't do taco. We go to Taco Maker. We want tacos in Puerto Rico, you know. But you know, it was said with the best of intention. It was a different time. It was you know, and thank God I was you know, and yeah, like Jessica said, Melinda Contreras Bird, Ada Berrio with her beautiful, wonderful accent. Dean Berrio, this is Dean Berrio, you know, and she was a breath of fresh air at the university. Barry Royce at Maddie College. I mean, there's a lot of great collaborators and co-conspirators at the time. Oh, my second father, Professor Michael Jimenez, may he rest in peace. He lives with me. He lives inside of me forever. I dream of him often, every once in a while. This is the impact that people like that had in our lives, you know, forever, you know. And I just want to say there's a couple of people on this call, you know who you are, who had an amazing impact, but two in particular. I think there's at least two members of La Junta here. I think Paulito, ¿tú estás por ahí?
Yeah,
Is he on mute?
He's here, he's here. We're all on mute, pero ahí está.
Mira, Paul, Irma está por ahí, also from La Junta.
Sí, aquí estoy.
Do you feel like singing? Just
Let's do
real
it.
quick.
Let's do it. Let's do it right now.
Si tú te vas, si tú te vas,
mi corazón se morirá.
se morirá. Si tú te vas, si tú te vas, mi corazón. Dale, dale.
Se morirá. Si tú te vas, si tú te vas. Oh my God.
Love you all. Love you all. Thank you for having us. Love you. Best birthday gift ever. Be good.
Thank you for joining, Eddie. Now, let's see, Ana, your story that you were sharing, it was so incredible. And I know we're over time and you're on the phone, but do you want to just finish that and then we can finish the call as well? But I want to hear about that differently and separately, perhaps. But anything you would say in closing, and then we can go back to Paul and Amparo for any closing words from the 90s, and then we might be done. But Ana, sorry that your camera froze, but and that we didn't hear the whole story. Would you like to close it?
Sure. What I was going to say was that, you know, we weren't always the best to each other, but we were forged in fire. And at the end of our 4 years, I feel like we found our connections. If I recall correctly, that was what I said at Chicano graduation in '92. We fumbled a lot, but we did find our way to each other, to hold each other up. And I think that's my biggest takeaway. And, you know, it's true. Some of my best friends still are the folks that I went to school with. That was what I was going to say at the end. I know I'm a downer, but I have my good points too.
No, you're bringing up all the right things, and we're part of the Recuerdos effort is to make sure that people don't have to learn these things again, and the bravery that you exhibited in working at the financial aid office and going back and making yourself a person, not a name, is to be so valued, and that bravery needs to get reapplied over and over and over again. So thank you for sharing that, and thank you for doing that. Now, I'm going to turn it back to Amparo and to Paul, but one acknowledgement: Manuel del Valle has been on the call, and he was in the 70s call, and from the 70s call, one individual that came on campus from day one to try to increase the numbers and get all of us here through the years was Manuel. And so I just want to acknowledge that the fact that he's on here. I know we're already 20 minutes over, but Manuel, thank you for making this call and for everything you did to make the 90s decade happen. And of course, the 80s were in there in between. I'm going to turn it over to Amparo, maybe since you kicked it off first with the panelists, the facilitators. And any closing thoughts on Amparo?
I want to echo that we were kids, right? And for many of us, it's taken a long time to process and reflect. And I want to say heal. That was my experience. I also think that no matter who I have ever spoken to, it is no doubt that the kind of education and the skills that we learned are unmatched anywhere. My sister and my brother have gone to the universities. And so I want to continue to encourage you. You're my gente, you're my loves, to look for that nugget of hope and joy, and to reach out to, just like I was taught by Manuela, like I was taught by the folks in the 80s, to reach back and to uplift our community and kids who are looking to go to college and the kids that are there now. And so that these lessons that were hard for us may be a source of strength and joy for the young people who are coming to Princeton now, and our own children who are now going to Princeton, and to encourage more of us to share these stories because they're really important. And I think that I often tell my son that, what was the point of me going to Princeton if there's no benefit for him, right? Like, what was the point of going through all of that if he cannot today benefit from it? If my nieces and nephews, if your children cannot benefit from it. So I cannot tell you enough what joy and what love I feel to see all of you and to say to you, thank you. Thank you for surviving. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for recording your memories. We need them. And the university could never repay us for all that we did, but I think that we owe it to those who come after us.
So well said. Thank you. Thank you. Paul?
Yes, thank you. And I want to end quickly on that note. Again, thank you all for being here. And thank you, Eddie, for joining on your birthday. This call would not be the same without you for me. Okay. Yes, sir. And I say that, I want to highlight what Amparo said. We look at the totality of our experiences. And many years ago, I learned that life isn't all, just roses. And Eddie said that, and we have to look at the fact that, I grew up a poor Hispanic in Brooklyn, and I could focus on how challenging that was and oh my goodness and this and that. And then Princeton was tough. And as I mentioned, we learned, but Amparo just said, I feel joy and I feel love when I'm on this call. Those experiences made us who we are today. And the fact that who we are today can really create this emotion of joy and camaraderie and of love and of pride. It took me years to reconnect with Princeton. I didn't go back to reunion for I don't know how long. And then Eddie reached out, Eva reached out, and then when I went to the Adelante conference, oh my goodness, the pride that I felt to see that people that some had horrible experiences, but you know what? They could still pinpoint to a moment that makes you a better human being today. When my father passed away, my senior year at Princeton, okay, 3 days before Thanksgiving, which was 3 days before my birthday. And I say that because part of my reason, I was the first of my family to ever go to college. So part of my motivation was to show my father, who was my best friend growing up, okay, this was for you, and yet he passes away a few months before I get to graduate. And then to know that Eddie Olivera did not go to Puerto Rico that Christmas which is huge, not going to Puerto Rico for Christmas, to spend it because I spent Christmas alone mourning the death of my father, and that he did that for me. Are you kidding me? That eliminates the negativity of my experience at Princeton. Stuff like that. That still I have there today, that I'm proud to say that a few years ago when the hurricane and was happening in Puerto Rico, I said, Eddie, come stay in my house in Orlando, or whatever it is. I haven't even met your wife. Bring the whole family. You got a place here. I'm gonna focus on that. You know, and yes, it was tough. Yes, there were moments that shaped us, but they shaped us. And I would gladly say they shaped us for the better, because here we are. And pridefully, whether I met you personally or I'm meeting you tonight, I'm so proud to be part of this group. And I want to thank you for allowing me to share and for you being open books with us today. And I look forward to meeting you in person I haven't and reconnecting with you if I haven't for a long time. Thank you so much, guys. And again, thank you to Juana, Marvin, and Rick for making this happen.
Thank you all. Thank you for hanging in there. We went over. Great investment in time. The video, there will be a video that will be edited and available. If you want that one-on-one interview, please reach out to Juana, Margaret, or me, and we can make that happen. And we'll have the zeros, the first decade of the 2000s in a couple of weeks, and then the 10s a couple of weeks after that. We weren't all part of that class, but to learn the evolution of the community over the years, please participate and see what the stories were. Thank you so much. Yeah, Paul, last comment or no?
Juan has his hand up.
Hey guys, sorry to interrupt, but I just want to share one more recuerdo, and it's with Eddie Olivera. And since we're all here, I want to might as well do it. My mom passed away 2 weeks ago, and in the midst of all that planning, I really wanted music for her mass. And in Puerto Rico that week, she died July 25th. That week is the main holiday, so there's no one in Puerto Rico. I called 4 singers, no one. And I called my dear friend, mi hermano Eddie. Eddie, I'm so sorry. Can you help me with this? Since he has been always my sidekick in Puerto Rico, doing events for the Princeton Club in Puerto Rico, Eddie's always been my right hand. So Eddie said, don't worry, I'll take care of this. And it turns out that he sang the song that I wanted my mom. That reminds me a lot about my mom. So he sang that in her mass. So Eddie, I'll be forever grateful. You, my family, and everyone was saying, who's that singer? Man, he knocked it. That's awesome. He did a great performance. So that's the kind of recuerdos that we will continue to build. And Paul, Eddie has been our brother in the darkest days. He's been there, and Eddie, we love you. So thank you all for this wonderful experience and sharing this time.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. I'll have a good rest of the evening. We'll talk soon. Abrazos.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.
A great night, everyone.
Be well.
Hey, thank you. Everyone.
Adelante. Adelante,
Guys.
Tigre, pa'lante, siempre pa'lante.
Siempre.
Sí se puede.
Sí
Sí
se
se puede.
puede.
Sí se puede. Sí se puede. Sí se puede. ¡Guau! Los quiero.
Un abrazo a todos.
Abrazos.
All right.
Everybody.
Eddie, feliz
Pudo.
cumpleaños.
Gracias, mi amor, te quiero. Te ves
Y pronto
súper,
voy a
Dios te
Puerto Rico,
bendiga.
te voy a molestar. Adiós.
Dale, me llama
Yeah,
para
everybody.
que pruebes para que pruebes el ron.
All right.
Pablito, papi.
You're so funny.
Pablito, man, está cabrón.
You're not alone, okay?
Ay,
So don't say anything inappropriate. No, te creas.
No, she's recording.